No, there is some discussion of adult content in here just because it is part of the show, so proceed at your own risk. Hi everyone, my name is Shauna, in case you didn't know, and welcome back to another video. So I am going to be talking about Extras today, which is a TV series. So this is part of my Daniel Radcliffe series because out of the 13 episodes in the series, Daniel Radcliffe is in one episode. So I'm going to watch all 13 episodes of this series and share my thoughts. We'll have some outfit change because there's going to be 3 times that I'm going to check in with all of you. The first time I'm going to check in with all of you is after I finish season 1. The second time I check in with you will be after I finish Daniel Radcliffe's episode, which is in season 2. Then the third time I will check in with all of you is after I finish season 2, and after I finish season 2, I will share my thoughts on the series as a whole. Now, I am looking forward to seeing Daniel Radcliffe's episode, but as a whole, I'm not looking forward to the series. And there's one very obvious reason why I'm not looking forward to this series. I try not to get too political on my YouTube channel, but I really do not like Ricky Gervais. I don't care about pronouncing his name right because he is not a great person in my opinion. I do not like Ricky. I just feel like he could have had potential with some of his works, but just literally just keep your mouth closed and then people won't start hating you, Ricky. If that isn't dedication to watch this entire series starring a man that I hate just for Daniel Radcliffe, then I don't know what dedication is. I'm watching this through BritBox, and I ordered BritBox through Prime Video. BritBox is the only place that I'm aware that you can watch extras currently. I struggled for a while to find where to watch it, and then I randomly decided to check BritBox one day, and lo and behold, it was on there. So if you want to watch extras, I recommend BritBox because as far as I'm aware, unless you buy each season individually, there's no other streaming service where extras is streaming. I don't know too much about extras yet. Like, it seems like it focuses on like extras on TV shows and movie sets. Like, I think that's the setup, but then I think there's individual guest stars for each episode. So I'll let you know a more cohesive summary after I watch season 1, but for now I'm gonna go and I'll give you my first of 3 updates after I finish season 1. Talk to all of you in just a few seconds. I finished season 1 and it looks like I have found my least favorite Daniel Radcliffe work, although I haven't seen season 2 yet. I've just seen season 1, which is when I said I'd do my first little update of my thoughts. Season 2 may change things, but as of right now, it's looking like this is going to be my least favorite Daniel Radcliffe work, which really sucks. And honestly, if I'm being quite honest, if this were filmed in 2023, I firmly believe that Daniel Radcliffe would have been like, no, I'm not going to associate myself with this work. But it was filmed in 2005, I think it was. And Daniel Radcliffe was a young man, and yeah. Oh my gosh. I think there was like 2 jokes that I actually found funny. I liked the celebrity guest, so I will mention that, but a lot of this is just going to be criticisms of the show because it is so outright terrible. So I can give you a better synopsis of what the plot is. So season 1 follows Andy, who's played by Ricky Gervais. I feel like I'm saying his name wrong, but I really don't care because I really don't like Ricky. So it follows Andy, and he's trying to like get better acting roles. He wants to be more seen, he wants to get more lead roles, he wants to specifically get a speaking role because he is an extra on like TV and movie sets. So that's the whole like concept of this show. Like, that's why it's called Extras, because he's an extra on a TV set and he keeps trying to get lead roles and roles with speaking lines and things like that. Now, he also has his friend Maggie in the show, and Maggie is also an extra, so she is working with Andy, but she isn't necessarily trying to get like speaking roles because she's sort of like viewing working as an extra as like a hobby, but she is trying to find a partner, a boyfriend. So that would be somewhat of an interesting idea for a show, but then everything goes wrong right away. So there is 6 episodes in season 1, and each episode is called the famous actor or actor's name who's in there, because there's one episode that has 2 famous actors. So let me just read off the guest list, which I'm surprised that Ricky was able to get such a big guest list, but I guess he's been in the industry for a while, so he might have a lot of connections. So Ben Stiller, Ross Kimball, and Vinnie Jones. I have no clue who Ross is. I mean, I obviously saw him in the show, but I like didn't know who he was before this. Kate Winslet, Les Dennis, another one that I have no clue who he is. Samuel L. Jackson, and Patrick Stewart. And the thing about this is these celebrity guests are playing themselves, and I think for this show, that was not necessarily the best choice. I mean, I get why they do it, because they're like the lead roles in the show, and so Andy is like trying to talk to them and trying to use them to get like a speaking role. But the thing is, there is so many offensive jokes in this show. There are so many just outright terrible lines, and these characters are saying it as themselves. And I'll go into that more. I'm going to go episode by episode to go into more a little bit why that's so bad. So each episode focuses on a different movie or TV show set. So episode 1 is Ben Stiller's, and his is a Holocaust movie focusing on Jewish people during the Holocaust. So I right away found that Andy came off as cocky, pushy, and self-absorbed, which is how Ricky comes off to me in everything that I've seen Ricky in. Like when he's being himself, when he's not acting, which not hard for him to act as essentially himself but with a different name. I do also have to say that Ricky was one of the writers of the show, so like all these terrible stuff in the show can be blamed on Ricky. Like there was another writer too. There was like 2 co-writers both in the show. I'm like, yeah. If I were to not know anything about Ricky outside of TV and I had seen this show and I learned that he wrote this show, I wouldn't be surprised to hear about all the terrible stuff that he's done. Terrible stuff meaning like he said some really bad stuff. Like I was looking up some of the stuff to see if there's anything that like I hadn't heard of that he had said that was like offensive, and there was one thing that I didn't see. Apparently he had a Netflix special where he was extremely transphobic and made transphobic jokes. Anyways, yeah, as you can see, I don't like Ricky. So I started keeping a list of like all the offensive jokes in each episode. So in this episode, there's Holocaust jokes, completely unacceptable and anti-Semitic. There's a cancer joke. There is a sexist joke about women. There's disability jokes, which made me really uncomfortable. It's really not okay. And the character's just like straight up ableist. I'm like, oh, this is awful. There's also racism in the show, and they sort of have a little bit of a racism joke. And I feel like a lot of this show is just trying to make the characters be so like hateful and like insensitive that it's making it uncomfortable to the point where it's supposed to like try and make you laugh by how awkward and uncomfortable these characters being pricks make the show. But I didn't laugh at all. I was just straight up uncomfortable. Now episode 2 with Ross Kimball and Vinnie Jones. So this was the first one that like I actually found a joke that I personally thought was like sort of funny, and I was a little like disappointed that the first joke that I thought was like sort of funny in this show was literally potty humor, because there's like a diarrhea joke, like a running joke throughout this episode about diarrhea, and I'm like, that's like sort of funny, but like it's really sad that the only funny thing in episode 1 and 2 is a diarrhea joke. So this one is a historical series that they're filming. The director in this one is really gross. He's a sleazeball who sexualizes women to like an extremely gross degree. And I'm like, that is true for the industry, but also I thought this show was supposed to be like funny, like because it seems like they're trying to be funny with all these offensive jokes. It wasn't working. I was surprised there was fat phobia against Andy in this episode, and I was surprised that that fat phobia was in there, because in the first episode all of the like offensive stuff was like Andy saying stuff. There's nothing directed at Andy, so I was like, wow, I'm surprised that there's actually some directed at Andy. But like at the same time, the way that they bring up the phobias and hatreds that I said before is to make it awkward, to try to make you laugh, and it doesn't really work. It just makes me uncomfortable and irritated. And I also felt that this episode and some of the later episodes too really devalue extra work. I feel like extra work and being a background actor is very essential for movies and shows, but I feel like this series really devalued that work in the way that they discussed being a background actor and an extra, because that's like really important work. A show can't come together without all these background actors and extras. Like I get the whole plot of the show is that he's trying to get a line, but like he shouldn't devalue extra work while like trying to get a line in a show. And then episode 3 involved Kate Winslet. There was ableism again, trying to make this awkward so that you'd laugh, and I was like, no, this is actually really awful that you're doing constant ableism to create uncomfortable and awkward scenes with a character with cerebral palsy. Kate Winslet also says really anti-Semitic things in this episode, and I'm like, she's playing herself, so it's coming across really bad that she's saying anti-Semitic things, because she can't just blame it on the character, because she is playing herself. Like, specifically, one of the things that she said is that she said that she's only doing a Holocaust movie to get an Oscar because this one is another Holocaust movie. But in this case, this Holocaust movie focuses on like nuns during the Holocaust. But at the same time, I'm like, Kate, why did you agree to play yourself and say all these anti-Semitic things? I thought the prayer meeting was like slightly funny, but then it turned really uncomfortable and awkward. But like the start of the prayer meeting was like slightly funny, and I was like, okay. Two things that I found slightly funny. I'm not laughing, just slightly funny. I'm trying to throw the positives in there too. I'm not trying to just hate on this show all the time, because I legitimately went into this with an open mind. And I was really shocked that Kate Winslet was like playing a nun. Like, so she's playing herself, and herself in the show is playing a nun, if that makes sense. But while she's dressed as a nun, she was like saying very sexual and explicit things. And I was like, dang girl, dang. That's weird, and also not what I was expecting from Kate Winslet. Now on to episode 4. Episode 4 is about Les Dennis, and in this episode, Andy gets a role on Aladdin, like a stage play for it. But I thought that it was really like gross and uncomfortable and racist the way that they like did the casting of this episode, because it's an all-white cast doing Aladdin, which you gotta have a lot of actors of color when doing Aladdin. You can't just have an all-white cast. And Andy was cast as the genie in it, but Andy darkened his face for the role. Like, it was visibly darker, and I'm like, that is straight up blackface. Like, what the frick? Like, just hire characters of color. Don't have your white actors darken their faces. And I was like, it's not funny. It's disgusting that a character would darken his face for the role. I know that it's a fictional story, but it's still gross, and it is still blackface. There was a sexism joke in this episode, and there was tons of homophobic jokes, and I was really, really upset by those homophobic jokes, and it was really gross. I also thought that it was really uncomfortable that there was an explicit discussion of sex that occurred between a 50-year-old and a 24-year-old. Like, there's a 50-year-old standing there essentially naked and telling Andy about his sex with a 24-year-old. It was really gross and uncomfortable. In episode 5, I didn't write as many notes for episode 5 because I was just so irritated by this whole entire episode. So this episode is the first episode with characters of color in it, and it stars Samuel L. Jackson. So there's black actors in this episode, when none of the other episodes have any sort of diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. So this whole episode involves making awkward scenes and uncomfortable scenes to make the show funny. Like, you're supposed to be laughing from how awkward and uncomfortable it is, but the way that they're doing that is just straight up racism. So I'm like, why is the only episode in season 1 with characters of color the one where you're gonna nonstop do racist things? The racism gets even worse because the character Maggie takes a black man back to her house, and she's trying to like hook up with him, you know, and then she has a plushie with blackface on it on her shelf. And I was like, what the frick? Why? Like, that is so disgusting and awful that you'd even think to include that in a show. And then what kills me is in episode 6, you see like some scenes in her house, and that plushie is still there, the blackface plushie. Oh, and in this episode, the type of like show or movie they're filming, I would label it as like a legal thriller. Like, there's a lot of police involved, and it seems like Samuel Jackson is like the president, it seems like, or someone in office, and it seems like a legal thriller type thing with like action. I don't know, they didn't really exactly clarify that much. Episode 6 is Patrick Stewart, and Patrick Stewart's episode, they're filming a Shakespeare movie, which is very fitting for Patrick Stewart. There's a homophobic joke in here. Patrick Stewart is playing himself, but he's really like freaking pervy and disgusting about women in the show, and I was like, you're playing yourself. You realize you are playing yourself as a pervert. You're not playing a character, you're playing yourself, which I found to be really, really gross. And this whole episode frustrated me because Andy is such a rude and terrible friend to Maggie, and he can't even apologize for himself. He has to make someone else do it to fix things between him and Maggie. And I'm like, no, Andy's just straight up a rude, terrible person that Maggie deserves better. Maggie shouldn't even talk to him anymore. So yeah, I could go on with my ranting, but I'm going to stop there. Basically, this show so far is offensive and using really awful jokes at the expense of minority people to try and get a laugh, but the laughs never come from me. This is really awful and disgusting. Now, I have season 2 that I need to watch, which has 7 episodes, except for I'm really not looking forward to season 2, so I think I'm going to watch a movie tonight to give myself like a break from this show, because every time I watch an episode, I would just get more and more frustrated at how terrible this show is. You know, season 2 could change things. Season 2 could surprise me. Season 2 could be so good that it made it worth it to watch all of season 1, but I don't know. There's 7 episodes of season 2. I'm not 100% sure when Daniel Radcliffe's episode is. I'm gonna look that up. But I will update you all when I watch Daniel Radcliffe's episode. I'm going to talk specifically about Daniel Radcliffe's performance and about how he plays into the show and stuff like that. And then my third and final update will be after I finish all of season 2. So yeah, sorry that this is somewhat of a rant. I just really hate this show. So yeah, I'll update all of you soon. Well, I watched Daniel Radcliffe's episode of Extras. So far I've seen 4 episodes of season 2. I found out that season 2 is actually 6 episodes long, but there's a holiday special. So I'm still undecided about whether I'm just gonna do one more update after this one to do all of season 2 plus the holiday special recap, or I might do another update after I finish the 6 episodes and then a 4th update after I finish the holiday special. I'm still undecided. But today's update is going to be about Daniel Radcliffe's episode. He was in season 2 episode 3. His episode is called Daniel Radcliffe and Diana Rigg. Literally no clue who Diana Rigg is, but that's okay because I did see her in the show. I just don't know what she's been in before. So this movie, the focus, the set that they're on, is a fantasy movie with a Boy Scout. And Daniel Radcliffe plays the Boy Scout, and in there it says that Daniel Radcliffe is 17, which the fact that he's a minor and some of the stuff that was going on in this episode, I was like, what the frick? I thought Daniel Radcliffe's introduction to the episode, not so much his introduction meaning his first appearance, but the first talking about Daniel Radcliffe being in the episode, I thought that was sort of funny, and I thought it was a great way to introduce him into the show. And I thought it was fun when the agent didn't know who Daniel Radcliffe or Harry Potter was, and I thought that was fun. I really did think that. And there was one scene where Daniel Radcliffe was messing around with a condom, I'll just say. That was sort of funny. But here's the thing, Daniel Radcliffe was 17. There's barely any kids on the show, so Daniel Radcliffe's 17, and his part in the show was extremely gross considering his age. And the thing about this show that I absolutely despise is the celebrity guests are playing themselves, yet they have to do all this problematic and gross stuff as themselves. And I don't like that. So essentially, Daniel Radcliffe in this episode, his personality or his plot point, what he's doing in the episode is that he's just trying to hit on a bunch of women. And he's talking about wanting to have sex with a bunch of women, and he does things shows a sex motion with his hands. He tells someone, oh yeah, I've done it with a girl before and stuff like that. At one point he even kisses an adult woman, but again, he's 17, at least according to the dialogue. He claims he's 17. I should look this up, whether he was actually 17 during the filming. Yeah, he was 17 during the filming, possibly 18, I think 17. So it's why is one of the few minors in the show that you have so interested in having sex with older women, which would essentially be pedophilia if the woman were to engage in sex with them? It was a little gross and icky. Now, did Daniel Radcliffe do a great performance? Yeah. Daniel Radcliffe is a phenomenal performer. He does fantastic in everything that he's in, and I think he did fantastic with the role, but I don't think he should have taken on this role because he's playing himself, and himself is playing essentially I don't even know how to describe it. Would I call him a pervert who sexually assaulted the gal that he kissed, because the gal that he kissed didn't want to be kissed. So yeah, Daniel, I love you to death, but why were you on this show? I know you were young, but the show's not a good look for you. I think if this show had been made in 2023, Daniel wouldn't have agreed to be in there. So another actor that was in this episode that I was why isn't his name in the title of the episode? Because the title of the episode is always whoever is guest starring in the episode. Warwick Davis is in there. I love Warwick Davis, and Okay, I like him in this episode because he doesn't really do like problematic things, unlike most of the other guest stars in this series. The problem is, the purpose of him being in the episode is basically just to be ableist towards him. So there's like non-stop ableism towards Warwick, and I feel like Warwick was probably really uncomfortable with the ableism that was going on in this show. There's like the M word used against Warwick at one point. There's just non-stop ableism and saying really gross things about Warwick because of his height. And I think Warwick did a great job with his role. I think Warwick is a fantastic actor. I think he did a fantastic job with the role that he was given. But at the same time, I am sure Warwick felt really uncomfortable with all of the ableism that was going on in the episode. And it's one thing if it's like a serious movie or show addressing ableism, because then it's like serious, you can address the realities of it, how negative it is. But this is a comedy show, and they're just trying to get you uncomfortable with all this like hatred and like phobias and isms and stuff. So just trying to get you as uncomfortable as possible and feel as awkward as possible so you laugh. But I think that's really just gross. There's ableism against a kid with Down syndrome later in the episode. And now granted, you see some of the fallout of like how ableism is like negatively affecting Andy, because Andy is one of the chief characters who's being ableist. But at the same time, it's used to be funny. It's not used to seriously address the reality of ableism. So, yeah. I was not a huge fan of this episode. I love Daniel Radcliffe. I love Warwick Davis. But this episode as a whole, I was like, no. This is just straight up ableist, and we shouldn't be trying to make jokes and laugh about ableism when that's a very serious topic. No, is this my least favorite Daniel Radcliffe work? I'm not sure. I feel like it's really down low so far. I mean, things could change in the last 3 episodes of Extras. I doubt it. But here's the thing, like, this is really down there with Beast of Burden for me in terms of like if I were to rank all the Daniel Radcliffe stuff, because I feel like Beast of Burden is really boring and slow, but there's no problematic things, but because it's so slow, it was like hardly watchable. But at the same time, this one's hardly watchable because of how problematic and awful it is. So I don't know what's worse. I really don't know what's worse. I suppose morally this one's more wrong, but I feel like this one's more watchable than Beast of Burden. I don't know. And Daniel's really like considerate of what roles he's in now. I think this was just a really old one that Daniel filmed when he was a young adult, so yeah. Not a huge fan of this one. So I'll be back with one more update at least. I might be back with 2 more updates, so I'll see you in a little bit. So I finished all the normal episodes of season 2, but I had a dream last night with Ricky in it, and so I think I need to take a little one-night break from the show before I watch the Christmas special. Oh my freaking gosh. It was not pleasant to have a dream about Ricky. And in my dream, he was asking me about his shows and what I thought of his shows. And I said, I don't like to be mean, so I'm not gonna say anything. Which sort of on brand for me. Okay, so for this update, we're going to talk about all the episodes of season 2 except for Daniel Radcliffe's episode, since I talked about that yesterday. So season 2, I found that I just like couldn't get myself to care about it. Like season 1 was such a mess that by the time that I was watching season 2, I was like, I really don't care. I really don't care. The Daniel Radcliffe's episode, of course, I've talked about that. I did care slightly more about that one because Daniel Radcliffe was in it, but for all the other episodes, I was just like, I really don't care. I'm so bored. I'm so frustrated with all of these freaking offensive jokes that are put in there. So let's go episode by episode again to discuss this. Episode 1's guest was Orlando Bloom. This was filmed for like a court trial. And I found the court trial, like the fake show they were filming, to be more interesting than Extras as a whole. And in this episode, Maggie was also away from Andy for a lot of the episode, and I found that Maggie was more interesting and entertaining away from Andy. Now, it doesn't excuse some of the stuff that she said in season 1 and did in season 1. Like, she still did some stuff that I was like, you can't come back from that. But at the same time, I was like, she's a little more interesting. I can actually tolerate her a little better when she's away from Andy. Andy's a bad influence for her. I was getting really frustrated with how much Orlando kept, like, trying to show off all the time. And I was like, you are literally Orlando playing Orlando, okay? He's playing himself. Yet he's constantly trying to show off. That's the thing about this freaking show. When the celebrity guests are playing themselves and being annoying and rude and problematic, but they're playing themselves, it's weird. I don't like it. I don't like it. If they were playing a character, it would be different, but they're playing themselves. For this episode, there was anti-Semitism, homophobia, racism, and there was a positive mention of Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is extremely freaking transphobic, so yeah. There's just no need for any of this hatred to be in the show. And again, they just used it a lot to make the scene uncomfortable and awkward to try and get you to laugh from that. And I'm like, it's not funny. It's not funny at all. It's coming off as insensitive and rude. And do you know how books have like sensitivity readers? Or they're supposed to have sensitivity readers to help make sure that like the representation stuff in there is accurate and respectful. TV shows need that too. Especially this freaking show needed it really bad. Episode 2's guest star was David Bowie. Here's the thing, I normally say David Bowie, but I found out recently from one of my internet friends, whether you say Bowie or Bowie, it depends on where you are in the world. So since this is a British show, I'm going to say Bowie. There was like one joke in there that sort of made me laugh. There was a joke about Wind in the Willows. I thought that was sort of funny. Out of a whole half-hour episode, there was one joke that I found faintly funny. And then let's talk about all the freaking problematic things in here. There's really extreme racism that's supposed to be funny on the show, but it's not funny. And it is one of the most extreme racism scenes that I've ever seen. So basically they film Andy's comedy sitcom. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the comedy sitcom. I mean, I'll go a little into detail. I just don't want to like spoil it for people who might be watching the show. But basically there are characters who tape their eyes back, and they do that so their eyes look like thinner and slanted. It's a freaking racist thing because the point of the tape is to try and make you look Asian. It's so freaking racist. And then they sing a song. I don't even want to say it out loud. Just, you know how people, when they like mimic like Asian languages, they say certain things? I'll just leave it at that. And they were also singing the song about, pardon my language, being covered in shit. And I was like, what the fudge? Why are you making fun of Chinese people? I know specifically Chinese people because they were wearing hats that were specific to the Chinese culture, and they were welcoming Chinese people into their office. And I was like, this is the most racist thing that I've ever seen in this show. And that's saying a lot because there has been so much racism and freaking problematic, disgusting stuff in this show. So I was really disappointed that they did that whole skit. And it was supposed to be funny, especially since it was part of like a TV sitcom with like a laugh track and stuff. So people were like laughing, trying to make it like funny. And I'm like, it's not funny. It's just disgusting and awful. I hated how the men in this episode were acting like a woman would just be willing to have sex with anybody. And like a woman should be grateful and open to having sex with anybody who even slightly asks. Like that was really disgusting. And it is entitlement for men. And I hate it so much. And then Bowie, David Bowie. David, dude, like, why did he agree to be on this show? Because he sings a song on the show, and in this song, he's just singing straight up fat phobia, and he makes a suicide joke. And I was so freaking disappointed in David for being in this and for agreeing to do this. If I had agreed to do a guest star on this show and then I saw that I was playing myself and I saw the type of awful things that I would be forced to do and say as myself in the show, I would have said, F you, I'm done. I'm not doing this. But apparently none of these actors have an issue with it. Episode 4, the guest star is Chris Martin, who I didn't know actually until I started watching the show. But then I started watching the episode and I was like, I actually know this dude. Chris Martin is from Coldplay. Chris comes off as like really insensitive in the show, like he's trying to promote his music during like a non-profit ad to like raise money for kids to get clean water in another country. And I'm like, Chris, dude, you are coming off as an insensitive prick, but you're playing yourself. So it's not like the character that you're playing is coming off as insensitive. What kills me is there's times where like I've seen actors like play themselves for a show and it worked out really well, like Supernatural. There's that one episode, The French Mistake, and some of the actors play themselves. That one worked out really well. This show, it just doesn't work. This episode focused on the BAFTAs, which is like an award ceremony. I was really disappointed in this episode, and this is sort of like a running joke in the later episodes too. But Andy's like shamed for losing his virginity at an oldish age, 28. And it's so frustrating to me because when you lose your virginity is like a personal thing and people shouldn't be shamed for losing it earlier or later than anyone else. So I was really sick and tired of that joke. Like the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, it's not the end of the world. And then it kept going on and on and on, and I was so frustrated. So listen, I'm asexual, so I feel like I have different thoughts on this than anyone else, but I do want to say the way our culture like makes it seem like you're supposed to lose your virginity when you're a teen is like weird to me. Like everybody is allowed to have their own individual journey with virginity, and like nobody should be shamed for what year they lose their virginity. Yeah, I could go on a whole rant for this, but I'm not going to, and also I don't like talking about sex so much because asexual, but it's just important for me to mention that because it's something I feel really strongly about. For episode 4 though, I didn't know there was an end credit scene. Like I just happened to like hit play through the whole credits, but there's an end credit scene. And I was like, do any of the other episodes have end credit scenes? Like, did I miss any end credit scenes? I'm not going to go back and check because truthfully, I don't really care that much about this show anymore. But at the same time, I was like, how come I didn't know there would be an end credit scene this episode? Sometimes I feel like I need a little warning ahead of the movie or the show that says there will be an end credit scene, stay until the end. They don't always do that, and then sometimes I miss end credit scenes. Like, I didn't know Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets had an end credit scene for literally years, but it does. Okay, episode 5 was Sir Ian McKellen. I love Sir Ian. I think he's a fantastic actor. I think he did a pretty good job in this play, and generally he probably had some of the least problematic stuff out of all the celebrity guest stars on the show. I thought in particular Ian's initial part in the episode was done really well. I thought that he was like goofy, but he was acting so well that I was like, dude, this is freaking awesome. Sir Ian can take any line, any role, and turn it into something fantastic. I thought that the way that Andy's agent was hitting on Maggie was super creepy and gross. I just hate in general how the men interact with the women on this show, I guess. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing that more and more the interactions between the men and women in this show were gross. It seems like the men don't know how to interact with women. There's this phrase in Andy's sitcom that by this time in the show, by episode 5 out of 6 for season 2, I was so effing tired of this line that I was like, if I ever hear this line again, it will be too soon. And the line is like, are you having a laugh? Is he having a laugh? I'm not going to say it exactly like he does because I literally can't stand it, but I'm so sick and tired of that line. Now, I knew that this episode would be homophobic based on just reading the synopsis. The synopsis is about how Andy is in a play, a gay play with gay lovers, and Andy's playing one of the lovers. And knowing how the rest of this show has gone, I knew it would be homophobic, and it was. It was. Everyone except for Ian and except for the other lover in the play were homophobic. So Ian, thank you for not being homophobic, but also Ian, you can't force people to kiss each other if they're not comfortable with that. So there's so much homophobia in there that I was really uncomfortable and disgusted, and at times I felt nauseous from how much homophobia was in this episode. And on top of that, the play that they were acting in with the gay lovers, the play part itself was just like terribly written. I was like, what the frick? It seems like you should have just gotten a queer person to write the play, even though the play didn't have too many lines in there. Because I was like, this is so poorly written. If it were a real play, everyone would walk out after just a few lines of dialogue and not stay for any more of the play. But yeah, it's really freaking disappointing that there's so much homophobia in episode 5. Episode 6, the guest stars were Robert Lindsay, Jonathan Ross, and Robert De Niro. I actually didn't know who Robert Lindsay or Jonathan Ross was. I don't know if I should have known who they were, but I didn't know who they were. I knew who Robert De Niro was, of course. So this episode starts off right away with fatphobic jokes. Not cool. Not cool at all. So I have 3 bullet points for this episode. Let's see how fast I can talk about those, because this video is going to be super long. I felt like Andy was a terrible friend to Maggie. You get to see this throughout the whole series where he's a terrible friend to Maggie, but it really reaches its peak in episode 6 of season 2. Maggie truthfully deserves someone better than Andy, and if the Christmas special makes them a couple, I'm gonna be so mad. But Andy doesn't deserve Maggie because Andy is a terrible human, and Maggie, she does some not so great things, but she does deserve better than Andy. I was really uncomfortable with this episode with how there is a kid who is sick and in the hospital. And my issue wasn't that there was a kid that was sick and in the hospital, it was that the mom was too demanding of Andy, expecting like, oh, my son is sick, so he deserves everything. That really frustrated me and got on my nerves, especially because sometimes these like celebrity interactions when a kid is in the hospital can really mean a lot and bring them so much joy. And I was like, why are you turning into like this uncomfortable joke? And then Andy's reactions just came across as really insensitive and really like he didn't care that a kid was sick and that a kid would potentially lose their life to this sickness, because the mom doesn't make it 100% clear like what exactly is going on with this kid, but it sounds like his life was on the line. Final thing to talk about, there's way too much sexual content in this episode and I was really uncomfortable. And also the fact that there's barely any kids in this series, and then one of the few episodes where there is a kid who plays a significant role, there's also tons of sexual stuff in the episode. Yikes. So those are my thoughts on season 2 of Extras. Now all I have left to watch is the Christmas special, but I'm going to take a break tonight because I literally need a break. I've never had this happen before. We're watching a show and I keep telling myself I need a break because I don't like it. But I promise on my life, I will finish this show. I will watch that Christmas special. I will report back on what I think. I'm sorry that this video has turned so long. It's basically just a really long rant of mine by this point. So I'll see all of you in my next update when I talk about the Christmas special. Hopefully it's somehow better than I expect. I was like, why can't I zip my jacket up? Oh, because I'm wearing my jacket inside out. So I watched the Christmas special for Extras, and I don't know if it's better or worse than the rest of the show. So there was some offensive jokes in here, but there was much less offensive jokes than other episodes. So let's just go over those offensive jokes first. There's jokes about sweatshops, there's racist jokes, homophobic jokes, sexist jokes, there's a joke about suicide, and there's a character just being straight up fatphobic, which I'll get into later. So this is called a Christmas special, but Christmas is just like in the background. It's not really like an important thing in here. So I don't really know how to like describe this episode. It didn't feel like super like special or anything. The only thing that makes this like different from the other episodes per se is that it's 80 minutes long as opposed to the like 28-minute long episodes for the rest of the series. It sort of is less about these characters like filming different shows and more about basically like everyone's lives going up into flames, and because of that the episode's really depressing because there's so many terrible things is happening to each person in here. Like Maggie has really severe financial troubles and the agent gets fired, and Andy's just like being miserable and not happy with where he is in life and his career. So it's much more depressing. So I was less like uncomfortable and I was less offended from everything in this episode, but I was more depressed. And a lot of times it felt like they weren't even trying to be funny anymore. It felt like just they wanted to be like, oh yeah, life sucks. Here's all these terrible things happening to these people. Also, speaking of depressing things, Andy is a terrible friend in this episode for most of the episode. There's like 2 minutes maybe of the episode where he isn't a terrible friend. And I feel really bad for Maggie because yeah, she said some offensive stuff. She truly did. But still, she deserved better than Andy, who's just a straight up terrible friend. And if Andy were a real person, I would hope that all of his friends would ditch him and find better friends who respect them more. I do have to say that the last couple minutes of the episode was pretty sweet, and it was the most heartfelt part of the entire show. I thought it was really nice that it ended on a sweet friendship moment with just meaningful stuff in there at the very end of the episode. And I think if this show had had more of that spread throughout season 1 and 2, it might have been a little better. Although truthfully, to get the show better, it would have had to take out all the offensive jokes. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking this show is one that classifies as a show that didn't age well because of all these offensive jokes in there. So yeah, let's talk about the celebrity cameos for a second. There is only really like two celebrities that I personally recognized in there. I mean, they kept talking about like different celebrities, so I'm sure if you know more about British celebrities than I do, you might recognize some of the names, and maybe some of the people make a cameo in there, but there's only two that I really recognized. So there's Gordon Ramsay. He's very briefly in there. He's fat phobic when he's in there, which is really disappointing. But yeah, Gordon Ramsay's there, and I was not expecting him to be in there. All the other episodes of the show like have the title of each episode be like who's starring in the episode, like which guest is cameoing. And for the Christmas special, it's just called Christmas Special, and then the guests that just randomly appear just like surprise. The best thing about the whole episode to me, and honestly you could just like separate this from the rest of the show and just watch this scene, but Andy is in Doctor Who briefly, and David Tennant is playing the 10th Doctor in this episode, and I freaking love David Tennant as the 10th Doctor, so any bit that I can get of him in there as the 10th Doctor again is phenomenal. Of course I love him as the 10th Doctor. There's literally a life-size cardboard cutout of him right here. He is too freaking tall to get in this clip. Dang Doctor. So yeah, that was fun to see that little Doctor Who clip. But truthfully, I didn't need any more of this episode. I just could have separated just the Doctor Who scene and been completely satisfied. So, now that I finished the show, I would say that this is probably my least favorite Daniel Radcliffe work right now, because I was thinking about it more. Beast of Burden is like really boring and I was almost falling asleep, but it wasn't offensive. And so I'm putting Extras as my least favorite Daniel Radcliffe work currently, which sucks to say because I want to love everything that Daniel is in, but Extras is just not one that I can love. Would I recommend this show? No. I hate to say it, but I feel like the only people who could enjoy this show are people who are homophobic and racist and sexist and all of those things, so the jokes might come across as funny to you. But if you aren't those things, then you probably will find this show to be really offensive and insensitive. So yeah, that's all my thoughts and extras. I know that this is a really long video of me just rambling about how much I hate this show, but I told myself I was going to do a Daniel Radcliffe series where I talked about every single thing that Daniel Radcliffe is in that I hadn't seen yet. I have some more Daniel Radcliffe works to watch and talk about. I do have a request for everyone. If anyone knows where to watch National Theatre Live, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, please let me know, and specifically the one with Daniel Radcliffe in it. National Theatre Live, as far as I'm aware, has like filmed plays that are there very briefly. Then after they're done being there, they're like gone for good. And I'm like, is there some secret website that I'm missing that will let me watch it? Because I want to watch everything that Daniel Radcliffe is in. I have a few more Daniel Radcliffe things to watch. So there'll be more videos in this series for sure. So I have that National Theatre Live. I have The Simpsons to watch, Robot Chicken. I have The Game Changers, BoJack Horseman, which I'm thinking I might watch BoJack Horseman the next time that I do another Daniel Radcliffe series. I have Trainwreck, I have The Children's Party at the Palace, which was a TV special, I have The Tailor of Panama, and I have Weird, the Al Yankovic stories. So I am looking forward to seeing those and letting you know what I think about them. Hopefully I like those other ones better than what I thought of Extras. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. If you want to see more videos in my Daniel Radcliffe series, I'll have a playlist linked down in the description below where you can watch all of the videos I've done in my Daniel Radcliffe series so far. You can hear me talk about shows and movies like David Copperfield and The Woman in Black. I hope all of you are having a great month, and I'll see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye.